Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. I'm Mariana Borges from the International Union of Conservation of Nature, and I'm here to introduce the session, Scaling Bankable Peatland Projects for Water Security. Just sharing my presentation. So in our session today, we have the main objectives of highlighting some of the risks associated to peatland degradation and looking at opportunities to maximize the water benefits that derive from conservation, sustainable management, and restoration of peatlands. We'll also demonstrate bankable solutions to maintain peatland values, looking at examples from around the world. We'll showcase how corporate water stewardship can support bankability, and we will also discuss some of the key enablers to increasing financing to these important areas. So just to introduce peatlands, what are peatlands? Peatlands are a type of wetland, and they occur in almost every country on Earth, covering about 3% of the global land surface. They're also the largest natural terrestrial carbon store. They store double the amount of carbon as forests do. But on the flip side, when peatlands are damaged, they are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's key for significant emission reductions to restore peatlands. They're also critical for conserving global biodiversity, providing safe drinking water, and minimizing flood risks. So in our session today, you'll be with us for an hour, and we have a packed session, and we hope to have really interesting discussions with you today. After I stop speaking, we will have 4 of our speakers talk to us about examples of bankable peatland projects from around the globe. They will be talking about specific themes within that, looking at water benefits and co-benefits, looking at the role of business, innovative value chains, and bottom-up approaches. And just so you know that afterwards, we will assign you there will be breakout rooms around the same topics. And at the end of the day, we'll have a report back from our breakout rooms and the closing of the session. And I will come back to tell you a bit more about the next steps as we keep going. Just one small housekeeping comment, just to say that, as you know, you're meant to be on Zoom for the presentation, but please use the chat that is on Pathable. If you have any questions or if you would like to share information about you, we've added a question for you to let us know who you are, where you come from, and why you're in our session. So looking forward to interacting with you. And without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to David Smith from Southwest Water. He'll be talking to us about water benefits and other co-benefits. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariana. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this chance to talk. So, Southwest Water is part of Pennon Group PLC, who provide clean water and wastewater services to the southwest of England. Next slide, please, Mariana. Peatland catchments worldwide actually only supply water to 71 million people. And when you look in more detail, 85% of those people are in the United Kingdom and Ireland, and even more detail, actually 70% are in the UK alone. So when you look at the globe of the world, peatland restoration and the importance of peatland restoration for water supplies focuses on British Isles of Northern Europe, and then most interestingly as well, the Florida Everglades, you can see there in that excellent paper. Next slide, please. In the southwest, we have 3 important areas. Most important to us is Dartmoor, which is our deepest peatland and supplies 60% of the drinking water catchments in Devon and Cornwall. Next slide, please. These peatlands have been used extensively over the many years, and they show the damage features that same with many in the UK and across Northern Europe do. And as a result, the water that comes out of these peatlands has increased volumes of mobile peat in it, particulate organic carbon, increased amounts of brown coloration, dissolved organic carbon, and then sediment, where the peat has been eroded down to the base materials, and you get the base materials coming down the catchments. And with those come industrial pollutants that might have been trapped in the peat, for example, from lead smelting, and then new issues we're facing as water treatment operators, such as manganese, which causes treatment issues and issues for mains water pipes. And the breakdown of the peat itself releases other nutrients, which can then lead to algal blooms in our reservoirs. And the breakdown of those algal blooms, again, gives us new problems that we're experiencing, such as geosmin, which gives us taste and odour issues in our final product, which we don't want to serve to customers. So in summary, damaged peatlands become more responsive to precipitation, quicker flows after storm events, and lower base flows between those storm events as well. All of this makes it harder for the water companies to treat. And we don't have the same assurance that those water supplies will be there in the future, particularly in the changing climate and facing the threats we do today. And then as also there's a downstream risk of increased flooding from these catchments. Next slide, please. In the southwest, we see two damage types typically. Here on the left, you can see damages caused by ditches, which erode deep into the base materials on Exmoor. And you can see the solution in the bottom left. We've blocked those ditches up with a combination of different dam types. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the more common damage on Dartmoor, which is gully erosion. In this picture, shallow gully erosion, but we also have deep gullies. And you can see the solution again, which is blocking those gullies up with peat material from the site. In all cases, we've done restoration monitoring before restoration and post-restoration. So we understand and know the impacts of that peatland restoration on the many ecosystem services these moors provide. Next slide. Thank you. And we know from that restoration work we've done and that monitoring work, in the southwest, we can reduce peat flows through peatland restoration by 30%. And with that reduction in peat flow, we reduce dissolved organic carbon export by 30%, as most comes out during those peat flows. If you look to the pictures on the right, which is Black Hill in the Peak District, you can understand how particulate carbon emissions can be reduced very quickly by covering that bare peat surface, as you can see, with a fantastic cover of cotton grass and sphagnum. We get increased catchment base flows, and we get flood risk reduction downstream. And then most interestingly for us as a water company, we get reduced impacts and other things we're responsible for, such as bathing waters. Next slide, please. That's not all we get. You get all these other fantastic things through peatland restoration that we as a water company are not buying, but they nevertheless are things that we're doing. Increasing the biodiversity, the range of habitats and species and the value of that, managing invasive species, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from peatland that's damaged in the past, and in some cases bringing about new sequestration of peatlands. Improving the landscape from the damages of the past, increasing the recreational value and increasing the architectural protection of those archaeological artifacts in those moorlands. All important things and all co-benefits from that peatland restoration. Next slide. So to us as a company, what does it mean? Why are we doing it? This is the important stuff, really. So we can avoid paying extra cost on treatment. We can avoid building new treatment works. We can reduce the running costs we have by reducing the risk of shutdowns, for example. We can reduce the risk of new challenges that I talked about, such as geosmin and manganese. We get an assured supply into the future, perhaps, from our peatland catchments. Better to keep that peat on the hills than to risk losing it. And we can make a significant difference to the carbon emissions from those peatlands. And for us as a water company interested in balancing our business activities and our net zero carbon, that's a really important factor for the future. So how do we value those things? Well, carbon emissions are easier to value, carbon units are easier to value than water quality and supply issues, which depends very much on where the treatment works is, where your catchment is, distances between. And we can think about all of those things in terms of going forward, how do we value them, particularly biodiversity and those other values, those other services. That's it from me. So I'm going to hand over to Alexandra Frank, who I think is going to talk more about specifically how to value and how business can use those carbon values. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. My name is Alexandra Frank. I join on behalf of South Pole. We are an environmental consultancy and also an international project developer, and we help companies achieve their science-based targets through water and climate action in their value chains. So 2 slides next, please. And I would like to start with the latest IPCC report. So one slide back, please. Who clearly shows that climate change has affected all components of the hydrological cycle. And the source of climate change or global warming are greenhouse gas emissions. So what does a company have to do? First and foremost, it's about reducing and decarbonizing their value chains, but also their direct operations in line with science. So in line with that 1.5 degree scenario above pre-industrial levels. And most of the companies we work with, food and beverage companies, more than 80% of their footprint is related to their agricultural value chain. So within agriculture, what we speak about when we speak about decarbonization, it's, for instance, switching from synthetic fertilizer to organic fertilizer. And now the next slide, please. As a second step, also in line with the Science-Based Targets Initiative, companies can finance carbon removals and carbon avoidance within their value chain, so in order to compensate for their residual emissions. And this is also with the 2 arrows where peatlands can play a significant role because of the tremendous potential, as both David and Maria Anna have stated in the beginning, with regards to avoiding emission, storing those emissions in the soils, and also removing emissions, for instance, through peat forest rehabilitation. So the next slide, please. What does that mean for a company? If we move to the next slide, we can see back in 2016, the baseline. So basically, we have a very degraded peatland within a huge concession area of in the supply chain of one of our companies that we advise. And the key water challenges included severe land degradation due to burning, but also a drained peatland, so loss of a very important water-related area, changing rainfall pattern due to later onset of rains. The fire risks were a lot higher. And thanks to this company investing with the supplier in this peatland rehabilitation, not only were mitigation, but also adaptation goals achieved. So on the one hand, when we speak about mitigation, more than 130,000 tons of CO2 were mitigated over a 4-year period, but also so speaking to what David has said before, the peak flows during flooding times were also severely reduced. And the next slide, please. So what does that mean for a company? Any company close to their growers or supply chain has the possibility to keep those carbon credits for their own net zero target, or to monetize those carbon credits in at least 2 ways. One is through the voluntary carbon market, and the other one is through the compliance carbon market. And we all know that these projects are extremely complex and long-term. So any co-finance with an additional donor to finance those upfront costs that are really high, but also maybe community activities that are not that much related to carbon benefits, make those projects even more feasible and bankable. So next slide, please. If we dive into this one monetization market, the voluntary carbon market, on the left-hand side, we see that the whole market is driven by nature-based solutions. And on the right-hand side, you would see that actually already the the second biggest project groups is peatlands. And into peatlands alone, an estimated $87 million have flown already up to 2020. So any company that has peatlands within their value chains has a great opportunity to tap into that additional climate finance to co-finance or to finance this kind of rehabilitation activities. And in the next presentation, we will hear from Greta, who will speak about the productive use of wet peatlands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra, for your introduction. My name is Greta Gaudig, and I'm from the Greifswald-Meyer Center in Germany. And we are a science policy interface for all peatland-related questions locally and globally. Next slide, please. As you already heard today, the drainage of peatlands has a lot of negative effects on our environment. Next, please. And the only chance to stop or even reverse these negative effects is to re-wet the peatlands. Next. But if you or if we still want to use these re-wetted peatlands, we need an alternative concept. And this concept is paludiculture from Palus swamp. And paludiculture is the productive use of wet and re-wetted peatland sites with water tables at the surface so that the peat can be preserved. Next. One example of paludiculture is sphagnum farming, the cultivation of peat mosses. This are the plants you can see on the left-hand side. And this cultivation we do on re-wetted bogs, which were formerly used as grasslands. And this we investigate here in Germany for about 15 years. Next, please. The value chain starts with the seeding material, which can be produced in bioreactors. And the next step is to apply this seeding material into the field for the cultivation of peat mosses on the wet peatlands, including the harvest of the sphagnum biomass. And then the next step is the application of this harvested sphagnum biomass as a peat substitute in horticulture. Next, please. Then what is important to know is that we all use about 40 million cubic meters of peat globally every year. And this is a very large potential for sphagnum biomass produced in paludiculture as a peat substitute. Next, please. When we have a look to the current profitability of sphagnum paludiculture, you can see that it depends on the harvested yield, of course, but also on the bulk density of the material, which can be very different, and also, of course, on the price of the material you can get. But you also can see that this sphagnum paludiculture can also be already be profitable. But there's still the question, the next slide, please, how to improve the profitability of sphagnum paludiculture. And at first, there is a large, really high potential for cost reduction by optimizing the production chain. Because we are still in, let's say, a more or less pilot stage. And the second is non-market income, like incentives for peatland rewetting and paludiculture. And the third is surcharge on peat-free cultivated end products. Only 10% would already make sphagnum paludiculture profitable, even in the low price sector. Next, please. And paludiculture has a lot of benefits. That means ecosystem services which should be honored. And the next to the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions, this is also important for water retention and the cooling of the landscape, but also the reduction of the nutrient loads into the surface waters by the sequestration in the biomass. And we determined it for our sphagnum farming site in Germany was 34 kilograms nitrogen and 4 kilograms phosphorus per hectare and year. So it's a lot. Next slide, please. So incentives for peatland rewetting and paludiculture, the commercial scale implementation, and an increasing market demand for renewables, and last but not least, setting climate targets also for the agriculture and the horticulture sector will accelerate the development and the implementation of Sphagnum paludiculture as a profitable alternative to this drainage-based peatland agriculture and the peat extraction. So next slide, please. Sphagnum paludiculture is ready for implementation. So let's do it, and let's do it now. Thank you for your attention. And now I want to pass the floor to Dennis del Castillo from the Peruvian Amazon Research Institute, who will give a talk about the bottom-up approaches.
Hi, everyone. This is Dennis del Castillo from the Peruvian Amazon. I'm just talking from the heart of the Peruvian Amazon. That's fantastic to be with you from here, from Iquitos. Thank you. Next. Just to know what we are going to talk about. Peru has more than 15 million of hectares of wetlands. For us, the wetlands and peatlands are not marginal lands. Those are areas that are full of life and opportunity based on biodiversity. Next, please. So in those areas we have, in those wetlands, we have paichi, these are big fish, that's fantastic, without odors, without bones. Aguaje is a palm that has very high level of vitamin A. Camu camu, another white fruit, has a lot of vitamin C. Timber, food crops, and many more natural resources. Next, please. So, but we have also those aguajales. Peru has more than 6 million hectares of aguajales, stand aguajales. That's the main source of feed of wildlife, mammals, birds, and everything. Next, please. And also we know what is the role of, in terms of ecosystem service, climate change, how the peatlands, how it's important for us. So the science, the research that we've been doing over here in the Amazon is showing that it's very important and huge blocks of peatlands in the Peruvian Amazon. Next, please. So, but what happened is, in order to harvest those fruits, especially aguaje fruits, many traditional way of thinking are also exist. Many people kill those plants. So it's a matter, it's a challenge. We are working on that, how to make a difference, not to kill the plants, but also to harvest without killing those trees. Next, please. So that's the basic thing, how the people can start using those natural resources without killing the plants. So there are young people, women, men, everybody knows now how to climb the tree. Of course, it's not done for everybody, but we are starting. A lot of people is doing that, but we need to do more. Next, please. So that's a business. The business starts from there, from the field, from the aguajales, from the river, with local people, indigenous people. So the business starts there, harvesting, carrying those trees through the river, and that's the business. It's important to mention that more than 5,000 families depend directly on the collection of aguaje fruits. That's a very important plan for the Peruvian Amazon in Peru. Thank you. Next, please. So women play a very important role in each link of the value chain, starting from the collection and primary sale of fruits. That's a very common picture over here in Iquitos. Next, please. Sale of aguaje as fruits is a main job opportunity for women. That's done by women, regardless of their age. That's fantastic. Almost in every corner In Iquitos, you can see those ladies selling aguaje as a fruit, which is the basic of business in this region. A lot of people depend on that. Next, please. So, but also they started learning how to change, not just selling fruits, but also selling ice creams, different type of refreshment and flowering different ice cream. That's, as you can see here, in different forms, how the aguaje is, fruit is transformed and sell almost in every corner in Iquitos. Next, please. But that's a good news. There are some big business that are getting into that, because as I mentioned, we have more than 6 million hectares of aguaje areas. So there are some business who are making a big difference, I believe, because first of all, we at the very beginning, we thought that maybe business means, it's not really close to conservation, but it is. If a business and entrepreneurs do a very responsible way of doing business with local people. Yeah, it is possible that companies assume responsibilities to reduce the impact of forests and water and make business. And also, there are some responsible action can ensure the improvement of economic opportunity for local people. And it's possible to achieve circular economy because there are different opportunities. It's not just with aguaje, but also different other fruits that can be joined into that entrepreneur's activity. We believe that everybody could be a winner if we find if a responsible entrepreneur and businessman at the same time they are looking for improve the local life, and also just as I mentioned, we have huge block of aguaje and wild fruits into the Amazon. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all for me.
You're still on mute, Mariana.
Everyone, I was on mute, apologies. Just to say thank you very much to all the speakers for staying expertly on time. And the next part of our session will be the breakout rooms, where we get to interact more closely with the speakers, but also to get to hear from each one of you who's joining us today and have a discussion around the 4 themes of our session. So please bear with us. You'll see up on the screen how the breakout groups will be hosted. And beyond that, you will be hearing from our facilitators very shortly in your breakout room, where just bear with us while we assign those rooms. Thank you. See you in a sec.
Hello?
Hello?
I thought we could choose but they made the room. So somebody else choose for us. No problem.
But now the facilitators are all in one room. This is not correct.
Have we already moved breakout rooms?
I think we're still in the main room.
I think we're still in the main room. I would agree.
Well,
Okay.
just bear with us a couple of minutes. We're just getting everyone into their breakout rooms, and they'll be coming very shortly. Just bear with us. Thank you.
John, Mike, can I ask you a question while we're waiting? Do you have the technology to make a measurement for the emission of gas of milk cow? Can you hear me, John? No.
To me?
Yes. Does your research center has the technology to make measurement to see if using different feeding for the cow will also reduce the emission.
Yeah, there are such measurements, yes, that it exist, but we are not doing that. We are in Greifswald with our partners only measuring the greenhouse gases from the peat soils, from the organic soils,
I see.
which is emitted by the decomposition of the peat. But I know that there are also
but you know who they are?
I know who they are. Yeah,
fantastic.
I could establish some context if you are interested.
Yeah, I will write to you. Yes, because we are going to make a project, because we patented a supplement for cow milk that is for wealth, animal wealth, but also because works on the microbiome of the cow. Will increase the milk, the production of the milk, the quality of the milk, and at the same time should reduce also the emission of gas from the cow, because the cow stays better, so it's better fed. So for us, it's also important to make this measurement. So I will write to you if you can help me. Will be very useful.
Yeah,
thank you.
Send me an email.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope that you all enjoyed the breakout group discussions. Now I would like to invite our youth rapporteurs to provide a quick summary of the discussions in their groups. So first of all, I'd like to invite Dylan Jones, representing our newest Global Peatlands Initiative partner, Youth Engaged in Wetlands, to tell us what participants have discussed in the water benefits and other co-benefits breakout group. So Dylan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to be a part of this event and of Global Peatlands Initiative. So David led us through a discussion of some of the financial and practical matters that were involved in restoration. So we had a bit of a discussion around valuing water and the interactions between the waterway and where water is being used, as well as agriculture and how that impacts on water quality and the relationship that has with restoration. We moved on to looking at how quickly and how much you can see benefits given a restoration effort, and the differences between reduction of soil organic carbon coming through the water after a large rainfall event, as opposed to on an ongoing basis. Then we had an interesting discussion with an attendee from Chile with the Wildlife Conservation Society, talking about a similar situation they've had and the difficulties they're having convincing private companies how to restore some peatlands there. And there were some tips mainly around leveraging climate action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dylan, for this great summary. So yeah, during the session, we've learned from David Smith on the water benefits delivered by the conservation, sustainable management, and restoration of peatlands. And it's excellent to hear from participants on how they are working to overcome the challenges of valuing the benefits of these ecosystems, which is a necessary first step for improving the bankability of projects in peatlands areas for scaling up. So now I'd like to invite Frankie Turk to give us a little recap from the breakout group on the role of business.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Yeah, so in our breakout room, we discussed firstly some of the opportunities for peatland restoration. One of these is the increased demand for nature-based solutions in the market. This is especially when it comes to companies reaching their net zero commitments. We also spoke to a participant about a new mechanism in Indonesia, which is encouraging companies to restore peatlands. We also discussed some of the challenges, which include the need for like a whole landscape approach and really kind of the scale needed for carbon turnover, as well as the long-term management needed for peatland restoration. And we also talked about the need for like the restoration not to lead to bad land management elsewhere and carbon leakage, or that companies are using peatland restoration for not cutting emissions elsewhere. And we spoke about some very successful carbon projects that have shown good success, and that's about it we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Frankie. It's great to hear how businesses have been investing in restoring and helping to move peatland ecosystems closer to sustainable management and health. And as you rightly said, as a way for them to reach their net zero commitments. So carbon markets are one way that peatlands are being invested in, but as you mentioned, there are other mechanisms and methods that exist to incentivize investment in peatlands. So now I would like to pass the microphone to our youth rapporteur for the Innovative Value Chains Breakout Group, Svante Furtak. Over to you.
Hello. So for the sphagnum planting or for paludiculture, we are first talking about what options of paludiculture are there. And for the Northern Hemisphere, we pointed out that it's mostly, or that, for example, it can be sphagnum planting, whereas as well, there are different options for tropical peatlands, as for example, a project at the Victoria Lake with entrepenuers. And very interestingly, it was pointed out that paludiculture even has the opportunity to be a carbon sink. Then there came up the question how or what investments are set up. And Greta explained that that the Grasset-Meyer Center is working since 15 years on the Sphagnum project, and even together with a local peat company who's interested in producing raw materials in substrate. So who's interested in investing in that, but also that it actually needs the agriculture sector for the turnover. And last but not least, we were speaking about how to make it more competitive. And the discussion went to that it actually needs, firstly, a financial remuneration of the environmental services. And secondly, there's the option to include the private sector as, for example, carbon certificates, where we also have a local project with more futures. So far from my side.
Thank you, Svante. As we move toward the Paris Agreement targets, we can see new options coming in, as you mentioned, as we feel the increasing demands for innovation in agricultural development that creates value in maintaining peatlands wet. So finally, the summary of the bottom-up approaches discussions will be given by Eleonora Minelli, our intern at the United Nations Environment Programme in the Global Peatlands Initiative team.
Thank you, Julie. So the key messages emerged from the breakout room bottom-up approaches are clear. There are still several bottlenecks that must be urgently addressed. So one, we have first and foremost, private ownership. Local landowners are resilient to change still. They must be reassured that the change we claim for now is good and, most importantly, profitable. They still have to fully understand the importance of switching from draining peatlands to rewetting peatlands. Furthermore, dairy farming was noted to be another important obstacle to the rewetting of peatlands, as dairy farming is a very profitable business and rewetting is considered to be not as profitable yet. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Eleonora. While the role and knowledge of local communities may have been undervalued in the past, we can see that their leadership and involvement from the design stage is critical to develop bankable projects that can deliver long-term benefits to their community, for the protection of their lands and ways of life, and for successful and meaningful business. And the partnership experience shared by Dennis del Castillo today, built on the aguaje fruit, which thrives in wet, healthy peatlands, is a good example of that. So sustainable incentives are good solutions to ensure local support for the sustainable management and conservation of peatlands in the long term, for now and for green recovery. So this session gave us examples of innovative multi-stakeholder projects from around the globe that offer bankable solutions to maintain and re-establish the multiple benefits that peatlands offer to people and to our global environment. So it is exciting that knowledge, information and approaches to activate restoration, protection and sustainable management of peatlands are becoming more visible and numerous. And through these different examples, we can see a growing recognition that peatlands can deliver results and impacts on many fronts by investing in them. Keeping them wet and healthy means that they can perform their vital ecosystem services for climate mitigation and adaptation, for critical water benefits like water quality and quantity by helping to store and regulate flows, making our communities less vulnerable and more resilient, and also for the rare and unique biodiversity that they house, as well as the cultural and livelihoods they offer for people living around them. So thank you very much, Dylan, Frankie, Svante, and Eleonora. It's excellent to have our Youth in UNEP's Global Peatlands Coordinator to give some closing remarks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It's really great to see you from sort of sunny Nairobi, Kenya, where UN Environment Program is based, and this is where we house the Global Peatlands Initiative. I wanted to just thank the sponsors, thank IUCN, thank the co-sponsors, the speakers, and especially our youth rapporteurs. It's so important for their voices to be heard and for them to be part of the dialogue that's so critical for all of our climate future. It's really an honor to be here at the Stockholm International World Institute's Water Week. And it's so important that we continue to share across geographies the importance of peatlands. They're so intimately linked with water, and it's also intimately linked with our climate future. Really, the next 10 years will count the most against the climate and nature emergency in our fight against it. And we know that peatlands are carbon powerhouses. They deserve attention. Here we go. If the world really has any hope of keeping the global average temperature increase to 2 degrees, then urgent action must be taken to keep peat locked in the ground. And at the same time, we must work on restoration. Examples shared during our session of peatlands bankable projects saw that investing in healthy peatlands also makes economic sense. And as we reset our relationship with nature to building back better, peatlands protection, restoration, and sustainable management will be a critical pathway for healthy, green, and fair economic growth for our youth and for people around the world. These real-world examples that we exchanged on today really proves that peatlands are not wastelands, and they're treasures that can really secure livelihoods far and wide. And there's opportunities as well to scale it up. Next, please. The economics are clear. Nature-based solutions can provide over 1/3 of cost-effective climate mitigation needed between now and 2030. And we're urgently appealing to the private sector partners and financial community to collaborate and invest in peatlands as an important solution. Next, nature-based solutions are already being delivered, and we're really working hard, sorry, backward one, to make them more visible, credible, and also available for scale. We've really heard today that investing in peatlands projects can serve as practical examples. And in the US, for $1 invested, restoration can generate up to $30 US in economic benefits. It's an emerging workplace, green youth workplace that we really need to think about how to capture the opportunity in front of us. But we also need all hands on deck to enable this transformative change that we have in front of us for the future we want. Next. And the Global Peatlands Initiative partners would love to invite you to continue this conversation and many more at the upcoming UNFCCC COP in November at our dedicated peatlands pavilion. Here's a little visual of it. It's going to be a gathering place for many different stakeholders from around the world to connect and share experiences and knowledge on bankable projects and the components that will make them successful in their countries. The Peatlands Pavilion was co-developed by our core Global Peatlands Initiative partners, IUCN UK Peatland Programme, Greifswald Meyer Centre, Wetlands International, UNEP, Scotland's Royal College, and the University of East London. Here's this little snapshot of the physical pavilion, but if you're not able to travel to Scotland for the COP for any reason, we're going to be also having a virtual pavilion. So you'll be able to interact, to share your knowledge, to gain knowledge and exchange on our virtual pavilion. Next. We really do hope that you enjoyed the session. Please do join us as the Global Peatlands Initiative. Continue exchanging. There's some contact information there. And always we can go back to the Pathable link. We're really working hard to advance on many different fronts and make sure that our peatlands partners can raise their voices, innovate, and work together for action to transform both economics and decisions and choices that we make. Thanks. I'm going to pass back to Maria unless we have a little bit more time for anyone to ask a question.
I think we're going to be shut down in 1 minute. So thank you everyone and to all the partners and the speakers. It's been a great pleasure, and please send your information and anything you need to ask us on Pathable. Bye-bye everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis. It was wonderful to hear your work again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep going.
Yes, I have to keep going. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.